All right, so today we're going to be talking about interviewing. Interviewing is something that everybody is going to face, whether it's interviewing for a job or an internship or even a volunteer position or even an academic program. There are some PhD programs, if you're thinking about potentially going into academia, that you might need to interview for a spot. So interviewing, like anything else, the more you practice at it, the better you get. And the better you can solidify some of your storytelling, because that is a lot of what interviewing is telling your story. All right, we're going to do a quick little mini icebreaker. This was originally meant for if you're in Zoom. So let's just have a quick check-in with yourself. Think about how many interviews you might have done throughout your entire life. That could be a range, a wide range. Could be anywhere from 1 to 3, 4 to 6, or 7 or up. So after that icebreaker check-in, hopefully you're kind of getting in the mindset of interviewing and maybe some past experiences you might have had. Today, we're going to be talking about first impression, how we can dress for success when it comes to interviewing, some interview prep, the actual interview itself. Then we're going to go over some common interview questions. And then finally, some resources, and then what we are going to probably do the next class. Your first impression is important. You never get a second chance at a first impression. So think about it this way. Have you ever met somebody or just when introduced to somebody and they didn't leave a very good first impression? Your opinion of them might not be the greatest, needless to say. Right? So, and it takes a while to change your original opinion of them. So this is why first impression is always important and something that you definitely want to nail, especially when it comes to something like an interview. So how you present yourself makes a big difference. And you are putting yourself out there to potentially get a job or a volunteer position or an internship. But you want to make yourself stand out because you never know, there might be a bunch of other applicants to a position and you want to be the one that they choose. So how you appear, and this goes for Zoom interviews as well, which we have seen a lot more, but how you appear makes the difference, right? You want to be mindful of your body language. So this could be something like slouching, yawning, looking around the room, makes you appear like you're not very present or engaged. This is also prevalent on things like Zoom interviews or WebEx or an online interview. You want to make sure that you are excited. You want to make sure you are presenting yourself as if you are polite and confident. Even if you're faking it until you make it, do so, because this is your first impression, and how this action, this interaction goes will set a precedent for you. So make sure you are dressing to impress, aloha shirts. You don't want to be wearing tank tops or messy hair, or you want to make sure that you are dressing for the occasion. And that as well kind of is another way of presenting yourself and putting your best foot forward. All right, so dressing for success. So bouncing off of the previous slide, dressing for success is very important when it comes to an interview. And this also includes an online or a Zoom interview as well. Remember, you're setting a first impression, so to a potential employer. So dressing like you would as if you would be going into an office and to an in-person interview is important when you're doing things like online interviews. So this could be wearing a nice blouse or a blazer, professional dress, a button-up, a tie, a aloha shirt, whatever that may be. Make sure our hair is done. So you want to look good because, again, you're putting your best foot forward, first impressions. And a lot of this also comes with your camera. So when we're doing online interviews, you always want to have your camera on, definitely on, so that they can see your excitement and see the facial expressions and just kind of put a name to a face. You want to make sure you have some good internet connection. That can be a little tricky, I will admit. Sometimes internet cuts out or we might have some internet problems. Try your best to do what you can where you're not in a loud space. So if that's going into another room or finding an office, or probably not like a Starbucks because that can get pretty crazy and pretty loud. Just making sure that you have some good, reliable connections so that something doesn't happen and you get kicked out of the meeting or kicked out of the interview. When it comes to your camera, you want to make sure that you have a fairly decent angle on yourself. They want to be able to see you, right? They don't want to see your boogers up your nose or just looking at your eyebrows. So have a good angle on your camera. It's always good to be like straight on, like eye level if you can. And then also be aware of your lighting. So that could be a room when you have your light on, or, if something is super bright in the background, like if you're in front of a window per se, that can be a little tricky because then your face can be really shadowed and you might not be able to show your facial expressions. So just be aware of some of these things when it comes to online and Zoom interviews. And these are things that you can prep for before the interview actually starts, and what you probably should prepare for before the interview starts. But most important thing when it comes to an interview is just be excited and be yourself, right? You are excited for the opportunity to tell them about yourself and how you are going to be the best fit for whatever position that you are interviewing for. So, interviewing prep. This is probably going to be the most important part of your interview. You have to do your own research, okay? So when it comes to interviewing prep, you want to make sure that you know kind of a general idea of what you are applying for. Obviously, you want to know the job description, but it's also very impressive in an interview when you can do things like name drop or reference a current project or program that maybe you are interested in being a part of, and just show that you are aligning with their interests and their skills and what they're searching for. So this comes and simple. Just Google some stuff, Google their organization, some of the work that they do, and just be familiar with it. Some of the worst things that you can do is not know your job description. So please, please know the job description. Even if that's printing it out and highlighting a couple keywords and key phrases, it's very important. And when it comes to interviewing, and maybe you're done with graduation and now you're kind of onto the workforce, there might be a lot of similar jobs out there. So you want to make sure that you are keeping them straight. The worst thing that you can do is mess up like an organization's name or a job title or a program's name, right? So you want to know what you're doing, or you want to at least appear like you know what you're doing. So know the job description, do your own research, take some notes that you'll able to really show that your interests align with this organization that you're interviewing for. When it comes to interview prep, an interview is just storytelling, right? You're telling a story to an individual or maybe multiple individuals, how you have prepared and all of your experiences and education has led you to be the number one person for this potential position. So practice your storytelling, practice some of the things that you want to tell people about, maybe some internships, coursework, research that you've done, whatever it may be. But the way that you tell a story and the things that you highlight within that story, some skills, for example, that is key. And you want those skills to kind of align with the job description. So that's why it's important to know the job description. Each job description will include some keywords. Keywords that they're looking for in a cover letter and in an interview. So it's always good to incorporate those keywords within your story, because that just proves that you are the best person, your interests, your experiences, they all align with what they're looking for. So do your due diligence, make sure you're doing your research when it comes to interview prep. And you can do things like this by just simply Googling a organization. If you really want to get into it, you can even look at LinkedIn and look at some of the programs and program managers, and just do whatever you need to do to make sure that it is very obvious that you are interested in this program, and here are your reasons why. So please take the time to do your own research, not something last minute, like 10 minutes before the interview. You're going to just quickly Google what their main mission statement might be, but actually take some notes, take some time to get familiar, because again, the more you know, it looks really good when in an interview, when you can do some name dropping or project dropping. So make sure you do your research and take the time to do your interview prep. All right, during the interview. So you're in the interview now. You've already done all the prep, all the research. You've done everything that you can. You've practiced your storytelling. You've practiced in the mirror your different questions. Now it's time to kind of let it shine. Be mindful of things like your body language, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier, but some good body language would be leaning forward, shows that you're intrigued. Make sure you're listening. So when it comes to interview questions, there are some simple, quick, short ones, but there might be some other ones that are more scenario questions, some that have multiple questions within. So make sure you're listening to the entirety of the question. And it's okay to take a breath, think about your response, and then go ahead and answer. You don't have to jump on that response right away. So take a moment, figure out what you would like to incorporate in your response, and then go ahead and respond. And when it comes to responses, you got to be your own best advocate, right? You are your own best advocate here. You got to brag about yourself. You have so many skills that you've developed throughout the years in your education, in your internships, in your coursework and research that you've done, group projects that we have all been forced to with that love-hate relationship of group projects. Those are all skills that you have developed. And these are the times in an interview where you want to talk about them. So don't rely on a resume. Don't assume that the person in front of you, maybe the hiring manager or the group in front of you, have read your resume. You got to be your own best advocate here. So you have to make sure that you are demonstrating and telling them about all these skills and experiences that you have learned. And again, circle it back to how this particular skill or these particular skills and experiences have made you the right person for the job. All right, the end of an interview. So you've already gone through all the research. Now you've gone through the interview and all of the questions that they've asked you now. The end of an interview is very similar. 99% of the time, the person will ask you, do you have any questions for me? This is an opportunity for you to ask some questions. So if you have a question, great. But maybe you don't. Maybe you really don't have much to ask. You never ever want to say, no, I don't have any questions. That's it, thank you. You always want to ask 2 questions, and they can be general, but you want to ask at least 2. And these are a detailed question and a timeline question. So a detailed question could be something like, can you tell me what a normal day might look like in this position? Or are there any concerns you have on my resume that you would like me to address? These detailed questions, or could you tell me more about this project that I read about? These detailed questions help to showcase your research as well as your interest and your intrigue with the organization. A timeline question is going to be more for your sanity. So when you are interviewing, there might be multiple applicants, there might not be, and you never really know when they're going to be hiring, right? So for example, if you are applying for a government position or a federal position, it takes months to get somebody hired. I'm talking months. I had a friend, for example, who was, I believe, applying for the DOH, and it took them 6 months to get back to her and hire her from her interview. So 6 months is a long time. So you have some organizations that are like that, where you also have some that are about to hire you on the spot or want you to start the next day or the next week. So a timeline question helps you kind of gauge that time, right? When you might hear back from them. So a timeline question could be something like, can you give me an idea when I can expect to hear back from you about the position? Or what are the next steps regarding this position? So maybe there's another follow-up interview or something along those lines. So you always want to ask a detailed question and you always want to ask a timeline question. And even if you don't actually have specific questions, that's okay, you always want to have a detail and a timeline general question to have. Finally, you always want to follow up. So following up can be as simple as a quick email, thanking them for their time. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Something as simple as that. A follow-up email is very important, and it's actually something that a lot of people forget. So when you send a follow-up email, it can be short, it can be longer, depending on your conversation with the individual or group of individuals. But it shows that, hey, nudge, nudge, thank you so much. I'm still interested. Please get back to me. Whereas if you forget, or maybe they have a bunch of applicants, you kind of get lost. So a follow-up email is always a good thing to do. And you don't want it to be very long afterwards, like 24 hours max. Same day is even better, a couple hours later. So if you have an interview in the morning, follow-up email by the afternoon. So these are the type of things that you want to do at the end of an interview.
Arguably the most crucial part of the job search, an interview can make or break an opportunity. So to help you really prepare, we're going to dissect and analyze an entire interview from start to finish. I'll be sprinkling in a mix of tips about body language, etiquette, and how to answer common questions. Like, when exactly does the interview start? How do you deal with nerves? And how soon can you follow up? For years, athletes have used science and data analysis to improve. Now, we are doing the same for job seekers everywhere. This is Job Science. Meet Anya, a recent grad majoring in business administration. She's interviewing for an entry-level project management position. Note her posture. Head up, shoulders pulled back, no slouching, and no laid backness. The interview begins the minute you walk into the building. Anya treats everyone in the office with respect while keeping eye contact. From security personnel to receptionists, anyone you run into on your way in could be asked to give feedback on you. It's normal to be nervous. When nerves kick in, the natural human response is to take short breaths and breathe faster. Stay calm by taking a deep breath before entering. Hold it, count to 3, and then slowly breathe out. Pause. First, ace those introductions. Greet everyone in a way that is authentic to you, like, hey, nice to meet you, and then say their name. That one always works. You're more likely to remember their name if you say it out loud when you first meet. A lot of the time, small talk comes up before any questions. It's good to have a few current events or topics in mind. You can't possibly predict what they're going to ask, but you can practice answering the common ones, like, why do you want to work here? What makes you unique? Let's see what our interviewer asks.
So I want to hear more. Tell me a little about your experience and what you bring to this role.
Pause. When this is asked, they're looking to learn what makes you stand out. Be honest with your answers. That means having to pause and think for a second. That is all right. Think about your past experiences and how the role lines up with your future goals. It never hurts to be honest.
Great question. Ever since I was young, I've always been the organized one in my family. Whether it was helping my parents schedule vacations or color coordinating my closet, naturally that lifestyle got me here, project management. I've been a people person for as long as I can remember, plain and simple. I love team building and making sure everyone has a part. Just the other month.
Ooh, just really quick. Don't speak negatively about previous places you've worked. Instead, talk about what you've learned.
I helped lead a team of 5 to deliver a 3-week sales project a few days ahead of schedule. I'd love to bring these things here.
Perfect. A response like this not only answers the question, but also shows off her personality. But remember, there's no one right way to interview and answer questions. Be yourself and let your personality shine. Be aware of your movements. Practice polite, confident body language. Subtly miming your interviewer's posture can actually create a sense of connection. Of all places, unnecessary movements are hard to ignore in an interview. Whether it's tapping your fingers or bouncing your leg, be aware and stay present.
Hey, it's been great chatting so far. I guess my last question is, do you have any questions for me?
Ooh, this is a hot one. Make sure to have a short list of questions for your employer in your back pocket. Ask the questions you would if you got the job. If tomorrow was your first day, what would you want to know from the manager? Even if you don't have any burning questions, asking a few shows that you did your homework and that you really care. Some include, what do you like best about working here? What are some mistakes people have made in this position? What is a goal you're currently working toward? How will my performance be evaluated?
Well, I did read that you're expanding your software team next quarter. I'm curious how you plan to carry that out.
The interview isn't actually over. Always follow up within 24 hours with a thank you email to the hiring manager. This can be a quick note simply thanking them for their time, or a longer one that elaborates on some of the things you talked about. It's key to leaving a lasting impression. This was the breakdown of an interview. Till next time.
All right, so let's do a quick check-in. How are you feeling? So are you feeling pretty good, pretty confident? Maybe you've done this all in the past. This is all a review, or maybe you're still a little nervous, right? It doesn't matter. But the more you practice with interviews, whether you're already a professional or maybe you don't have too many experiences interviewing, the more you practice, the better you get. So hopefully you don't feel too nervous, but it's totally okay if you do. All right, here are a couple common interview questions, and there are plenty more than this list, but these are just a few that you might get when you're doing an interview, right? 9 times out of 10, or even 99% of the time, I would say the very first question that you will get is, tell me about yourself. And this is where you can go on to your elevator pitch. It can be something short, 30 seconds, quick elevator pitch, a little summary about who you are, what your interests are, and how they align with the organizations, or you can go into more detail depending on the interview and depending on what you want to highlight. Some other ones include, why are you interested in this position? So going on to your experiences, some of your interests, your passions. What can you bring to this position? So that's where you want to talk about some of your strengths, maybe some ways that you would love to develop the role. So that could be something that you want to really highlight your experiences here. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? So this is a question that I personally am not the biggest fan of, but you will get it, or you might get it. Where do you see yourself in a year? What's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? This is a kind of a tricky question because obviously you don't want to say, in 5 years, I'm going to start my own company. They want to hear something, how you would like to grow in their organization, how you would like to develop their organization. So even if you have plans to be a PhD student and get your PhD or start your own nonprofit, it's always good to kind of relate it back to that organization. Maybe you would love to develop a program of theirs, for example. So be careful with this particular type of question. Then you might also get a scenario question. So a scenario question is how they want to see how you problem solve. Tell me about a time you disagreed with a colleague and how you handled it. So this is a scenario question where they're looking to see how well you work with a team or how well you work with a group. A lot of public health positions, you will be working with individuals or multiple groups or multiple people. So they want to make sure that you are a team player. Don't talk negatively about past organizations or past colleagues, but more highlight how you overcame this problem. So scenario questions are common in interviews, so be on the lookout for those. And then finally, we had talked about this a little bit earlier. The last question that you might get is, do you have any questions for me? This is where you want to insert your detail question and your timeline question. If you actually do have questions, awesome, that is great. Definitely ask them. If you don't, keep it general, but you always want to have a detailed question and a timeline question. All right, so wrapping up some key takeaways. Do your research. Know the job description. Google some of the projects, some of the people that you are going to be interviewing with, the organization, and get familiar with doing your research. Practice makes perfect, right? The more you practice at your storytelling, highlighting the different skills that you would like to highlight, the better you get. So for example, if you have a job that you are dying to have, this is your dream job, try your best not to make it the very first interview. So if you can do 1 or 2 interviews and then make maybe this dream job interview the 3rd or 4th one, that gives you a chance to practice, iron out some of your details. I'm sure many of us have gone into interviews and leaving the interview, we're like, oh shoot, I should have said this, or oh dang it, I didn't highlight this. So the more you get to practice, the better you get. And you can practice too with a friend, a parent, a roommate, significant other, even with like your dog or in the mirror, whatever that may be. And speaking of practicing in the mirror, oftentimes now being in the digital age and being shoved into Zoom, we are seeing that some interviews or first time interviews are simply by yourself. And what I mean by that is the interviewer might send you a Zoom link and the 6 questions that they want you to answer. And the moment you open that Zoom link, it is recording and then you are staring at yourself answering these 6 questions. That's very common nowadays. Other ones that you can go into are the one-on-one interview, as well as a group interview or maybe a committee. So the more you can practice with this, being in this situation and practicing your storytelling, the better prepared you'll feel and be. And it's okay to be nervous. Interviews are kind of scary. They're nervous. You didn't get nervous. That'd be an interesting situation, but it's okay. The more you practice, the more confident you'll be. And remember, you are your own best advocate. So brag about yourself. Talk about all the different things that have prepared you for this moment and for this position. Why are you the best fit? So be your own best advocate. And it is okay to take a deep breath and answer your question in the best way that you can.